Hi, welcome to our next episode of the South Texas Power Lunch. I'm sitting here with Adam Blanchard. Thanks so much for coming out, Adam.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Adam is the CEO of Double Diamond. He's also a candidate for the Texas House, District 122. So we're super excited to talk a lot about what's going on in the industry that he's in, as well as what's going on in Austin and in Washington, D.C. I wanted to start off with you, if we could. Tell us a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey, because everybody's always fascinated about this. I know we talked ahead of time. You're a lawyer, which wise for you to get out of being a lawyer and be a former lawyer on that one. Some of us are aspiring to one day get out of the law. But tell us what moved you into from being a lawyer out in West Texas to now doing what you're doing at Double Diamond.
Yeah, so my dad's an attorney. My granddad was an attorney. That's just where I ended up. In law school, I was on our national trial competition team, chairman of the board of barristers. I just wanted to go try cases. And as you well know, you just don't try a lot of cases anymore.
No, you don't.
It's a lot of drafting and writing. And I tell people all the time, I'm an effective writer, but I'm not a gifted writer. And I certainly not what I want to be doing all day. And
Right.
so, I started dating my wife. Her father was an entrepreneur and just became a mentor of mine. And seeing my dad in his late 50s, just kind of working his fingers to the bone, doing litigation, I just started looking for an opportunity to get in business. And I didn't know what it was going to be. Met a really good friend of mine in a Bible study, actually in Lubbock, Texas, at the church I was going to there. And he worked for a trucking company in Lubbock. And he kept telling me the things he'd do differently at the place he was working at. And not in a negative way, just what employees do. And we were out one night watching baseball, and he told me this again, and I said, well, heck, why don't we start a trucking company? And he goes, well, how do we do that? And I said, I don't know. Can you get drivers and you can't take them from the place you're working at, and can you move the trucks? And he goes, yeah, I know some drivers. My dad's a freight broker. And I said, well, heck, I'll handle the rest. And so we started this thing in my kitchen a couple weeks later and got our first truck on the road July 1st of 2014. And
Wow.
it promptly broke down within 48 hours. It was funny. We took that truck to this old boy, this mechanic out in Lubbock. And when we pulled it in, he said, I'll get to your truck in a week.
In a week.
And I said, sir, I don't
And
think...
you're a single fleet.
Oh, yeah. This is
wow.
2 days within starting our company. And I said, sir, I don't think you appreciate the gravity of my situation right now. I said, you see that driver over there? I said, he's staying in a third bedroom of a house I'm renting a bedroom in. And we started this thing 2 days ago. And he said, well, I'll get to you in a week. And so I kind of sat back and I pulled up my pickup truck in his Caliche parking lot. And every 30 minutes, I went into his shop very nicely and respectfully and asked him if he'd had an opportunity to get to my truck. And after about 7 hours, I went in and did the same thing. And he goes, if you'll just leave my property, I'll fix your truck. And I said, I appreciate that, sir. And I learned a valuable lesson in business. It was ready the next day, but it's just that persistence, right? And so
The squeaky wheel gets fixed.
Exactly.
That's almost like an exact analogy of the squeaky wheel gets fixed.
Exactly.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so we started our trucking company. After that, started a freight brokerage the fall of that year, and then in 2020 started a commercial real estate brokerage. So, learned a lot of lessons over the years. I think you learn from your failures more than you learn from those things you've done right. But we've been blessed to have a great team that we've built around us. It's the people that have been with us. Some from working out of a third bedroom are still with us, and it's that team that has built this company. I tell them every day, I want to make sure that y'all are proud of the company you've built because that's what they've done. And so we've been blessed with a great team and blessed to have some success.
That's great. So to help our listeners and me just to Double Diamond, what you're doing on both the transport and the brokerage, explain how that works to people. So because most of us, we're great. We're like we put our order in for Amazon and that UPS or FedEx or private driver just drops the package off. That's what we think of when it's called a freight transport. What's the reality out there? How does that system work?
Yeah, so the industry kind of works in two larger segments, a little more complicated than probably the way I'm going to explain it. But, we've got Double Diamond Transport's our trucking company. So we have trucks, we have trailers, we pick up freight one location and drop it off at another. The freight brokerage really operates as an intermediary. So we have customers that need freight transported, and then we contract with trucking companies, including our own, to transport it. So that's the difference between the two. When you have a brokerage, you just have the ability to absorb more capacity for customers because if we load up with more than our trucking company can handle, then we have that outlet to be able to contract with other companies out there.
No, that makes sense. That makes complete sense. And we'll come back in a second to the industry stuff because I know that's another just fascinating part that everybody is interested in. Let's keep it though into your entrepreneurial journey. Give maybe one or two key stories, because people typically have them, for example, 48 hours in, you had one, but any other just, lessons that you learned during that journey from the beginning to where you are today, that if you could go back and tell yourself, back in 2014, I think is what you said, that you would tell yourself? Any sort of advice?
There's been so many things over the years we've done. Within my organization, I tell people all the time, let me know what you need and we'll make it happen. I think that support is hugely important for an organization. And I tell people all the time, punch the ticket, right? I mean, make the call. You don't want people paralyzed by fear. And I tell them all the time, I said, there's not a mistake you're going to make that's greater than one that I already have done, right? I mean, we've made so many mistakes over the years. Like, nobody's died, nobody's broke, money, fix it, and let's circle the wagons and not do it again. I mean, we bought trailers at one point that we never saw, right? I mean, we've just made, mistakes like that over the years. And
those are expensive lessons too.
Especially when you can't afford it.
Yeah.
And so, I think what's so important for those that are looking to step off the ledge, right? I tell people all the time, I said, when you're looking to start a new venture, you're outside your comfort zone, you look over the ledge and it's a big black hole. Right. You don't know if that hole is 400 feet down or 4 feet down.
Right.
But with enough determination and grit and surrounding yourself with the right people and with the right attitude and the right team, you find out real fast when you step off, it's 4 feet down.
Right.
And I think that if you can dream it, you can do it. It's not easy, but just stay the course, and you got to learn how to pivot. I mean, this, I know this. I mean, we're going to be a 48-state reefer operation, and we figured out real fast, which are refrigerated trailers, and we figured out real quick we weren't big enough boys for that. Those are expensive trailers, and so what we did is we pivoted, and we ended up just running all dry freight and just changed our entire business model, and really kind of we're blessed and lucky in a lot of respects, because instead of trying to run all the way across the country, we found out early on that we could be the most competitive at competing within the state of Texas. So we run that triangle. And so we can do things within our organization that, allows us to have a competitive advantage in Texas. It also allows us to recruit drivers that can be home every night. And that became a big thing. And then with the proliferation of e-commerce, the length of haul has shortened substantially over the years with so many warehouses out there, and so we just happen to be on the forefront of it, and have just been blessed by the success we've had as a result. Oh,
that's great. Pivot, that's something we talk a lot about. In fact, I've got some friends that make fun of me because I'm always like, all right, just pivot. How early in the phase or the process for y'all did y'all have to do that pivot? I mean, were you starting off doing the refrigerated trucks, and then what were some of maybe explain a little bit more detail around that? Because so many people think, okay, well, I have this great idea, I don't have it fleshed out, and they're paralyzed because they think they have to work out all the details. And you and I both know, no, the answer is get as much as you can. You're never going to have all the details, and get going.
That's right.
And once you get going, you've got to be willing to do the pivot, because in many circumstances, you're going to learn something and have to. Any sort of thoughts around how you guys, I mean, you said a little bit about it, but maybe focus a little bit more on that pivot and the factors around it.
Yeah, I mean, every decision you make in business is imperfect. And I think that you can sit there paralyzed and trying to analyze every component of a decision to the point where you've missed the boat altogether.
Right.
And so we figured out real fast with these refrigerated trailers, we can load them out, right? We can have a load that goes from San Antonio to Memphis. But the problem is the interior dimensions of these refrigerated trailers are a lot less than dry van trailers. And so when you're trying to get your backhaul, right, that's where you make your money, is on making sure your truck's loaded coming back.
Right.
Well, you have substantially less available freight out there because the size of these pallets don't fit inside these refrigerated trailers.
I see.
And then we bought a 48-foot trailer instead of a 53-foot. We bought the worst possible trailer we could have to start our company with, and we figured out the equipment was twice as expensive. So a refrigerated trailer is twice as expensive as a dry van. We've grown off our balance sheet. We didn't raise money. We don't have investors. It's just me and my business partner putting everything we got back into the company. And so we had some unique opportunities, within the state of Texas, where we had customers that had freight in Houston and they needed that delivered down to the valley.
Okay.
And we were able to do that kind of overnight by relaying it out of San Antonio at our trucking terminal.
Got it.
And so seeing that, our ability to do that, and so many other larger companies just couldn't because of the bureaucracy within them or just kind of how they handled themselves operationally. We're very agile as a small company. And so we said, look, let's sell these reefers and let's focus on dry vans. And the rates that we were getting were not much less for dry freight than they were refrigerated freight.
Right.
So we just started analyzing just looking at the financial component of it and just the operational component. We said, look, let's just focus in this area. And then as the regulatory environment continued to change over time, we really needed to expand our trailer pool. And so that was a huge component of it as well, because what we'll do is we'll take a loaded trailer to a facility and then just drop it, and then we'll have other trailers there that have already been unloaded pick up an empty and leave.
So you can get people moving more efficiently across.
You just turn those trucks.
You know, I
out.
never thought about it, but there's a lot talked about the Texas Triangle, which we're a part of. But then there's also the Southern Triangle, which I've even seen a little bit more people talk about that Southern Triangle as well, which we're a part of as well. We do sit in a very, some people don't realize, cross-border Mexico traffic, it almost always comes through San Antonio. It's pretty hard for it to not. I mean, you can get the El Paso to the west, but everything coming out of central Mexico is going to come through us because we can get to all the different places in Texas and beyond.
Yeah, I mean, you've got 40% of Mexico's exports come through the Port of Laredo.
Right.
When you start looking at the Port of Laredo, it fluctuates over time, but last I saw it was the largest port in the country by tonnage and volume.
Wow.
And that is such a huge opportunity for Texas and a huge opportunity for San Antonio, because I think with the logistics issues we're seeing at the Port of LA, I think they're going to persist because the issue we're seeing right now is their lack of chassis, which are the trailers that pull those containers out by truck from the port.
Right.
But the problem is that the regulatory environment is continuing to get more and more difficult in California. I mean, there are new environmental regulations for requiring newer trucks in and out of that port, which aren't available, is going to continue to be a problem. There are continued efforts to eliminate the independent contractor model in California is going to persist, and the U.S. Supreme Court is hearing one of those issues right now. But if they don't overturn it, I think these issues in the Port of LA are going to be long-lasting, and I think it's a huge economic opportunity for Texas.
So is the rerouting out of the Port of LA through the Panama Canal and then into Galveston or maybe one of the ports in Mexico, or what does that rerouting look like?
So we're seeing a lot come through the Panama Canal to the Gulf Coast.
Okay.
So whether it's the Port of Savannah, Port of Houston, I'm not as familiar with how much they're doing through Mexico,
right.
But I do. My prediction is that you're going to see more onshoring of manufacturing coming back to North America.
Just because they can't get the actual imports.
Well, it's that, but also the USMCA, right? What was NAFTA is always going to hold true, and that trade alliance that we have through North America is, I think, when you're looking at, I'm certainly not in manufacturing, but when you're looking at those long-term capital investments, you've got to identify areas that you think that the import-export laws are not going to change, that these backlogs that we're seeing in LA aren't going to continue to persist. And I think you're going to see more investment coming back this way. And I think if we continue to focus on the Texas economy, I think we can bring more manufacturing back to Texas.
Which we've seen a ton of that already in the last, 18 months. With so much manufacturing, especially high-tech manufacturing coming here to Texas. Let me ask you this from an innovation standpoint, supply chain. The hot topics right now as we sit, basically February of 2022 is we've got lack of workforce, we've got supply chain constraints, and then we've got inflation.
Which trifecta.
Which is raging inflation as of, the last several days here that is coming on. Some of these are all interrelated, of course. Talk about innovation in supply chain other than just rerouting. Are there any other innovations out there that people could go, oh, okay, there's some relief coming from technology utilization or just any other things that are out there? We'll get to the government aspect in a second, which I think is another major aspect, as you've already brought up. But what about innovations in the field? Are you seeing those?
We went through in 2018 the new mandate for electronic logging devices, and so that to ensure that all of the trucks out there on the road are complying with the hours and service requirements.
Right.
I think what we have seen since that mandate is a real proliferation in technology and trucking. I mean, we're an old school industry, right? I mean, just,
right.
Boots and jeans and cowboy hats. I mean, we are not an industry that, by the ownership itself, is lended itself, I would say, over time to technology, but we've really accepted it now and are really pushing forward. And I think that safety technology, for instance, is improving substantially. We're seeing more trucks with cameras on them to ensure that our motoring public is safer. We're seeing, most Class 7 and 8 trucks, most Class 7 and 8 trucks are automatics now. So you don't have guys running these 10 speeds.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, there's the development of the transmissions now, and the telematics has been huge. We're seeing huge growth in, automatic braking, lane departure notifications, crash avoidance mitigation systems. And so those are all developments that we're seeing that I think are going to help in a big way, and we're going to continue to focus on as an industry.
How much, and this will date me a little bit, RFID technology, it's been out there for quite a while, but its adoption was somewhat slow. Major players I know started to implement. What are you seeing in the tracker, RFID? There's other sensors that are out there, so that way an individual, retailer, manufacturer can literally track their, supply chain to the second. Are you seeing more proliferation of that?
Yeah, so through these electronic logging devices that we all have in our trucks, they're all hooked up to 4G, 5G.
Okay.
And so what that affords us the ability to do is, for instance, our electronic logging devices send information automatically back to our transportation management software.
Got it.
And what you're seeing a lot too is that we have the capability now to translate that information to our customers.
Okay.
And so you're seeing more real-time tracking of freight and the delivery of orders by our customers over time, which is, there's just more transparency. And I think more transparency is good. I think we're seeing a lot of development in our load boards. So if there is extra capacity by customers that is not contracted by a carrier, they can post those on the load boards, and more acceptance of those. And so I think you're seeing more transparency throughout the supply chain, which has brought prices down, which I think is good to the consumer.
Right.
And I think we'll continue to see that development over time.
Let's talk a little bit more, actually a lot more, about the political impact of things. Already brought up California, where political rules, regulations impact businesses and impact consumers, all of us dramatically. The Port of LA, prime example of over-regulation with not necessarily unintended consequences, but just consequences that were ignored, in my opinion. State of Texas has been the complete beneficiary of all of the problems, which is democracy is at its finest. We're the great experiment, and if some states don't do those things, it allows them to reap the benefits. So, again, another just testimony to our great country. Let's talk a little bit about what Texas has got going on, and specifically, as a South Texas business owner, what are things that are going on in Austin or even DC? Those big key themes that as a business owner, I need to know these issues are out there, and maybe we can talk a little bit about even your position on those issues.
Sure. Yeah, so I think that first and foremost, we got a jobs crisis in the state of Texas throughout the whole country. And I think that we have to tackle that issue quickly. I think we're going to tackle that issue through the continued development of vocational and training programs within our schools. I think that's incredibly important. We've got these associate programs, the STEM programs, for instance, that is really one of the most valuable things we have in San Antonio in terms of providing a skilled workforce for manufacturers like Toyota, for instance.
Right.
And so we've got to have a continued focus on ensuring that students are coming out of school job ready, that we're providing opportunities for them to get additional training so that we have a skilled workforce. I mean, I'm part of the No Child Left Behind era, right? Everybody was told they had to go to college.
Right.
And I think what we've seen since that is we have lost all of our skilled trades. I mean, we don't have enough welders, plumbers, electricians, truck drivers. I mean, we've got a driver shortage of 80,000 drivers right now. And, when you're talking specifically about trucking, I mean, we have a litigation environment here with these trial lawyers that we've got to resolve it. I mean, we're getting targeted by a lot of lawsuits, and it's causing our insurance rates to go up so dramatically that it's putting a lot of businesses a lot of trucking companies out of business. I mean, 88% of trucking companies have 5 or fewer trucks.
Really?
This is not an industry of big multinational or national conglomerates. This is the definition of the middle class.
Wow.
And when, you have so many lawsuits and your insurance rates are going up 20% a year, it's putting people out of business. And so we really focused on, with the Texas Trucking Association, I serve on their board, I'm chairman of the Emerging Leaders Council with them. Last session, we teamed up with Texans for Lawsuit Reform to get some relief on lawsuit abuse, and was incredibly active in that process through the bill drafting and testified in front of the House and Senate, got bipartisan support. I mean, it was good policy. We got 10 Democrats to vote for our bill, first vote on the House floor, and 6 of them were from San Antonio. Wow. And I think they identified that we need good policy coming out of Austin to help our industry, because trucking moves America forward. Everything you touch has been on a truck.
That's right.
And I think also with the driver shortage, you have to be 21 years old to cross state lines. And so everybody's wondering, why do we have such a driver shortage? Well, these students coming out of high school, by the time they're 21, they've already found a skilled trade. And we have been advocating for the Drive Safe Act in Washington for many years now to afford us the ability to get the 18 to 21-year-olds to be able to drive commercial vehicles across state lines. And we've told them we'll put a mentor in the cab with them. We're going to give them trucks with every safety technology feature available. I mean, this is legislation that you would think would be the easiest bipartisan bill you could imagine, but they still can't get it done. And so until we can resolve
Why do you think that is?
It's funny.
Is it just caught up in politics of, well, if you want me to do this, the tit for tat type of politics, or is there a fundamental disagreement with part of it? Because you're right. To me, it seems if we've got a supply problem, well, how are we going to increase supply, and how do we do it safely? Which you check both those boxes. I've got to market a segment that I can't, and then that segment, if I had some safety issues, well, let's go ahead and make use the technology you mentioned to address it. So why do you think they can't get that through?
I tell people all the time in Austin, right? I've advocated for transportation at the state and federal level for many years now, and I tell people all the time, in Texas, you can block and tackle, right? You can advance legislation and then also stop bad policy.
Right.
In Washington, I have found that it's pretty much just blocking. I mean, there's not trying to advance stuff up there is just so difficult because it's so partisan and so divisive up there that, when you have gridlock in government with our system of government, it just doesn't function. I mean, we've got to be able to work together on issues that are important to our economy and important to our communities, and we've got to get more leadership that's going to do that and cross the aisle when it's good policy.
Right. And
that's, I think, what we're seeing out of Washington, but we're seeing a lot of that in Texas, though. And there's issues related to our infrastructure, our power grid, our education. There's things that we can work on together. There's more we can work on together than we can't.
So talking infrastructure and trucking just from a small business for San Antonio, I-35, which with all of us that live here in San Antonio, we know don't get on I-35 ever if you can help it. What do you see as far as infrastructure challenges for the state that impact San Antonio so much? Because we do have so much freight coming through the city, the outskirts of our city. We do have so much freight that is clogging up the triangle through 35, to a little bit of a lesser extent 10 for, just because there's a little bit less population between here and Houston, but it's growing leaps and bounds. What are some of the things that we need to be thinking of from an infrastructure standpoint as small business owners? Because it is a lifeblood. Like you said, everything touches trucking. Anybody that's doing any sort of product or product delivery or anything like that that's going to go, it's going to touch a truck. What are those things we should be thinking about?
Well, I think for any economy like Texas that's growing, we've got to make sure that we have the infrastructure and investment in the infrastructure to allow for that. And over the years, I think we've done a good job of that. So you have Prop 1 and Prop 7, which were passed by the voters, that allow for dedicated funding that goes towards infrastructure. I think, we are very blessed in San Antonio to have Chairman Bruce Bugg, head of TxDOT, to, I think he's shown strong leadership in the development of our roads and highways. We can do it. We have the funding to do it without tolls.
Right.
And that's, I think, very important.
That's huge for our community.
And, you start looking at, for instance, the Port of Laredo. I think that we need to take a real focus at that port and expand it and provide the infrastructure necessary to afford ourselves the ability to have more onshoring coming back, to continue to grow our trade relationship with Mexico. And so from a small business perspective, I think we just need to continue to encourage more investment. We need to make sure that funds are dedicated to our roads and highways. I mean, I'm on the executive board for the San Antonio Mobility Coalition here in San Antonio, and they do a great job advocating for road and highway infrastructure funding.
Right.
And one thing that I think we're going to see coming in the future is there's obviously a new proliferation of electric vehicles. Our funding for roads and highways comes from our fuel tax,
right,
by and large, and we're starting to see more and more discussions of a vehicle mileage tax.
Oh, wow.
And I think that there's a lot of concerns with that. And if we're going to have, certainly those with electric vehicles are happy to pay their fair share. The average passenger vehicle pays between $150 to $200 a year in fuel tax. So instead of creating a whole new taxing regime that's going to tax us by the mile, and they at the federal level have considered targeting just at trucking, which would be substantial. Wow. But if it starts with us, it's certainly going to end with the average person.
Sure.
And why do we need to go create a new taxing regime? We can just add a fee at registration for electric vehicles. You've already got the administrative infrastructure in place.
Right.
Let's just collect it there and continue to have those funds dedicated to roads and highways.
What, a little bit off topic than what we were talking about before, but this just kind of triggers something for me. As I shared with you, being city council at Schertz, there was a lot with HighSpeed Rail, which became it was a joke. We talked about it a lot. This was 2012. It had been talked about for, I think, 10 years before that. So, we're looking at a 20-year dialogue regarding high-speed rail. I saw some of the mobility stuff around here of the different access points, but we're really now coming to a point here in Texas where public transportation is vital. It's not just for the lower socioeconomic to be able to get out, which is really how we look at it, I think, in the past. It's being able to get up to Austin, into San Antonio, into Houston. What do you see as the future for the high-speed rail or large public infrastructure, things like that get greater mobility? Because the highways are clogged. Do you see anything on there? Is there any, just thoughts on those type of investments?
I think when you're starting to talk about high-speed rail, you've got to factor in the cost component.
Sure.
And to me, with so much proliferation in technology and autonomy with vehicles, I think by the time, even assuming we really take a hard charge towards high-speed rail, I think you're going to find by the time you can complete a lot of those projects, you're going to see autonomy provide another alternative for us. You look at trucks, our trucks, there's a lot of technology now. It's called platooning, where you've got one truck that has sensors and another truck can basically draft behind it.
Okay.
And it creates incredible increases in our fuel efficiency, and technologies like that, I think, can provide an outlet for us.
So we can NASCAR draft along with our trucks is what it sounds
like. Well, it's you never know where it's going to go. We have autonomy coming. There's a lot of companies out there right now working on autonomous trucks.
Sure.
And a lot of people ask me, are you concerned about that in the transportation industry? And I encourage innovation and growth. We got to make sure that it's safe and that our motoring public's safe. My kids are out there too.
Right.
If we don't start looking at other alternatives, especially with the driver shortage we have, I think we're going to have huge issues. So I think, high-speed rail is great headlines. It is. I love the concept of it in a certain respect, but the reality between the cost component and the needs and demands that we have within our roads and highways now and the growth in technology, I think by the time we get through it, we're going to find a better alternative.
Well, and you're right. It's a headline grabber, and even dealing with it in the past, I was like, oh, it's not. I would tell you where it's come up a lot in the last several months is on the worker shortage, because there's mobility of workers, and we have now the proliferation of Zoom and all these virtual platforms. But at the end of the day, if you can't have, from a culture standpoint, that connectivity, it's going to be difficult to really drive team and everything else that you need to, that in-person interaction has. But for example, I've got one client, he's got 3 or 4 people in Houston. I think he's got 3 or 4 in Austin, 1 in Houston, and a couple in Dallas. It's kind of hard for everybody to get together. And then, we joke and say, well, there's high-speed rail. Everybody just get on the train, show up for a day trip, have that meeting, and then back to their place because of the mobility aspect. We've got the mobility of time and space, but we can't actually move the people. So that's why I ask. I get the cost of it. I mean, the cost is absolutely, massive to be able to do that.
And I think we've got to look. I mean, we're just coming out of this COVID pandemic, right? We're still, I guess, kind of in it to a certain degree, but our entire workforce is changing. I mean, you're seeing so many people that don't want to come into the office. As an employer, I find tremendous value in having people together, to your point.
Sure.
And I think that's incredibly important. That collaboration within a workplace, I think, is essential. But we've got a jobs crisis right now, and really the employees, those that we're looking to hire, are kind of leading the charge here. They're the driving force in what our workforce looks like.
True.
And they're wanting to stay home. And so if we're talking to HighSpeed Rail, we may be looking a year or two down the road and saying, look,
nobody wants to move. They just want to stay at home. Could be.
They want to live in Fredericksburg, right? And
there's no rail out there.
And that's what they want to do. I think to find a skilled and a workforce that we're all trying to target is great people to surround ourselves with and bring into our organizations. We're going to have to see what this landscape looks like in a year or two, I think.
Sure.
It's part of that conversation.
Sure. I mean, because San Antonio has a unique challenge for, tech labor. Which guys like Graham and others are deeply trying to Port of San Antonio, trying to create a ecosystem so that way we've got tech capabilities, and it's tough, and so you look at those things like, okay, well, everybody wants to be in Austin because it's cool, it's the new LA, those sort of things. Is there ways to better share resources? So again, it just comes up a lot recently as in San Antonio, some of the unique challenges we have. Some people think, oh, it's great to visit every now and then, but I don't want to live there. Some people say, no, I want to live there. I'll visit the rest. Yeah. How do you find that ability to move people around? Let me ask you another just topic on there is taxes. Small businesses, in dealing with what I do with transactional work, I've had a lot of influx of people. Lady from West Virginia just came to us, and so we talk about, business licenses, taxes, all those sort of things. Explain to me just, your thoughts about what makes Texas so competitive from a business taxation and what we do for our businesses here and where you see that's going.
Yeah, I mean, I think that right now we're seeing a lot of pressure from property taxes. I mean, that's an issue for not only homeowners but businesses. And I think we need to focus on our appraisal process. I think that there's some reforms there that can be done to ensure that it's a level playing field. I personally, as an attorney, protested my taxes for my trucking terminal one year, and going through that process was incredibly frustrating. I mean, they were comparing my little 5,000 square foot steel span building trucking terminal to brand new Class A tilt wall warehousing.
Oh, wow.
And that's not a fair comparison when you're looking at the appraised value of my property. And I think there's ways that we can shore that up. As you and I both know, and your clients and probably a lot of your listeners, is what makes Texas so great is that we understand the formula, right? I mean, to have a great economy and in a great state, you got to have low taxes, right? We've got to have good education and a workforce, and we've got to make sure that houses aren't so expensive that people can't afford them,
right?
And we got to have safe neighborhoods, and so I think we've got to continue to stay ahead of increased taxes. I mean, we pay not only property taxes, businesses pay franchise taxes,
right.
And I don't think there's any businesses out there that are beating the war drum saying, I don't want to pay taxes at all.
Right.
We just got to make sure that our taxing environment continues to stay competitive compared to other states, and we got to make sure that we don't implement a state income tax. I mean, we can fund our cities and our counties and our school and our state with our revenue now. We need to make sure we get more business people in office so that we continue to be fiscally conservative in Texas. We have the rainy day fund that continues to be funded at the state level, and I think that's through prudent financial decision making at the legislative level. And I think if we continue to do that and elect the right people, then we're going to continue to keep Texas great.
With all of the trouble, again, we'll bring up California again. What do you see some of the things that the state of Texas can do to even greater foster innovation here in the state? local governments have a lot of ability with tax breaks and things that they can do, but the state can get in there involved as well. Being again with shirts, we were one of the first communities to bring an Amazon distribution warehouse. Now these things are everywhere, but at the time it was a big deal, and it required both local and state cooperation to be able to get that deal through. What do you see, are things that we can do at the state level and local level to help San Antonio specifically grow that innovation?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a believer in bottom-up government, not top-down. I think to me, when you're looking at it from the state level, it's about putting tools in the tool belt, right? We've got to make sure that we provide cities and counties the ability to encourage more people to come in, incentivize companies to come in and invest. We let the 313 go last session, and I think we need to reassess that this upcoming session and ensure that local municipalities, counties, school districts, any of those have the ability to encourage folks to come in if it fits within their budget, if it fits within the direction of those communities. And so continuing to develop what we need to in the tools, tier zones, for instance.
Right.
I mean, there's so many different tools that we can provide that can encourage more investment and growth within our communities.
Last question, and for me, and I'd love to be able to talk about anything else you have. So San Antonio military, very military focused. One of the things that I love most about this city is just that strong military presence. Military medicine, as you know, is changing dramatically. There are many in the community here, and I'm one of them, that believe that strength we can use to pivot into the next phase of innovation for military medicine. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, there are concepts up there about basically we've got geekdom and we've got ecosystems around technology that are growing, creating ecosystems around military medicine, specifically leveraging the UT school, other big players, the large healthcare systems doing innovative things like Methodist, BAMC, and then this, entrepreneurial community to do something special. Have you had conversations about that in Austin?
I think not a lot. That's not a space I've spent a lot of time in, but this is certainly military city.
Sure.
I mean, we have a lot of military here, and making sure that we can transition them out of active duty, into our workforces, and then the partnerships that you have with private industry and the military, and the proliferation of technology that's being developed here in San Antonio is something we've got to continue to stay focused on. I think, as I look at it from the state level, for instance, as a person potentially that would serve this community as a state representative, is you got to be working closely with these cities and asking them, what are your needs? I mean, I think you got to come to it with a servant's heart and work very closely in conjunction to assure that if there are things that we can do at a state level that provide opportunities within our community in whatever segment it is, that I'm there to advocate for it.
Right.
And that, to me, is, I think, very crucial. And our continued development of medicine is huge. We just came out of a pandemic.
Right.
We got to make sure we're ahead of the next one, and making sure that we're providing the resources there. But Austin gets all the hype, but San Antonio's turned into a technology city.
It is.
And I think that we've got to continue to stay focused on that. We've got to make sure that we're supporting those companies in the development. Our education, for instance, UTSA is doing a fantastic job of developing more people in this technology space. Our school districts are. You look at Northeast ISD and their new programs that they're working on there,
right,
in their magnet programs for IT and technology. I mean, these are the things that I think are going to encourage and help support that continued proliferation in our growth in the technology space and others.
That's great. No, I'm with you on that. Let me ask you a final, I guess I kept saying final question, but I got another one. Ran for politics myself, and you get to talk to a lot of people, which is great. You have any good stories from the campaign trail of just amazing people you've met? Because I was always fascinated of the hands I got to shake. I assume you used to go to shake hands with COVID. I mean, this was pre-COVID areas, but you got any great stories to share of just all the interesting people you meet as you've been on this campaign trail?
Oh, it's, as you well know, in a campaign, right? Basically, I'm doing two things. I'm knocking on doors and raising money.
That's right.
In the raising money thing, if I could push that to the side, I would immediately. I've knocked on over 3,000 doors.
Wow.
And when I came into this campaign, I said, I never intended to run for office. I've got 3 companies. I've started from the ground up. I've got 4 kids and a very loving and understanding wife. And a lot of people reached out to me to run, given my skill set as an attorney and business owner, and I just felt very compelled to step up and serve the community. And when I did that, I said, look, I'll do this, but I'm gonna touch everybody in the district, because everybody can tell you what they think people care about, but right. I said I'm gonna go knock on 5,000 doors, and they said there's no way you can do it, and you can guarantee yourself by March 1st I will have done it. But talking to them, you hear so many interesting issues. For instance, daylight savings. A lot of people want to get rid of daylight savings. I never knew that was a thing, but
you go.
But it is. Get invited into a lot of homes. I was knocking on somebody's door in Timberwood Park, and this gentleman answered, and we just started having this great conversation. He invited me in. He's a taxidermist, and I don't think I have seen as many animals and mounts as I have in his house. And just those stories and the connections that you make and developing those relationships, because a lot of times people that are elected seem out of touch. And I think when you get out there and touch the community and you have interactions like you and I are having, and give people my cell phone number, then they call. And it's funny because I'll be knocking doors in Chavano Park, getting phone calls from people in Fair Oaks and Helotes, and people texting me from Hollywood Park, right? And that's the beauty of it. And they know that I'm there to answer their questions, and to reach out anytime. And so that's the blessing of it all. It's just the opportunity to serve. And I think if we get more business owners in office, is very critical, because you're going to take a more common sense approach to policy. I mean, it's like you and I do, and a lot of your listeners every day, is people ask me, Adam, what do you do for a living? Like, what's your job as an owner? And I tell them, I said, I'm responsible for building teams and fixing problems.
That's right.
And I think we take that same mindset to the legislature and get more business owners in our generation of business owners in office. We're going to see a lot of great things happen. I mean, our generation gets dogged on like every new generation does, but I have great hopes for us. And I think the way we view the world and our ability to work together, and I think our workforce we've seen, it's not that institutional commitment that we've seen from maybe our parents and grandparents' generation.
Sure.
We're wanting to find purpose in what we do. People want to be part of building something and being part of something great. That's where we found a lot of success within our organization. Mm-hmm. And I think that heart that we have within our generation is going to translate into a lot of great things for our communities as we begin to serve.
Well, I want to thank you for coming here and talking with us. This has been fascinating. I want to congratulate you, because I've done the block walking and 5,000 houses. I mean, this just shows, to me, your dedication to communicating with those that you serve, which doesn't happen all the time. In fact, most of the time it doesn't happen. It happens to the right people with the right billboards and everything else. But to take that dedication to get out there and actually meet all those people, that's fantastic. That's an amazing thing to hear, and I just hope anybody that's listening realizes the magnitude of that, because it's not what is done at all. Last little bit, anything you'd like to share, anything you'd like to say out there? I mean, again, I can't thank you enough for coming on this to talk about things. We hope to have you back after you are up there in Austin. Come give us a little update, after you get through this campaign and this election, and tell us what's going on even more in detail. But anything else for you?
I appreciate you having me on. I appreciate your listeners. I mean, I'm here to serve, focused on jobs, education, security, like I told you. I'm here to focus on the operational needs of our community and ensuring that everybody here has a voice. And I think it's easy for people when you're looking at elections. It's easy to find folks that can go push a button yes or no.
Yep.
I think what we
not show up, so they don't have to push the button yes or no, which is another political tactic that we both know about. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're exactly right. I mean, walk-in votes, right? I mean, you need, but ultimately what we need are strong advocates. And what I would say to anybody listening, that identify people that can go, for instance, in this position on the House floor, and go get the support for the policies that are important to us, and go advocate strongly for those. And we need people that can equally defend against them. And I would represent to you and your listeners, there's nobody better than me to go in there and fight for the things that are our core values, and would love to earn earn the support of you and your listeners. My website's adamfortexas.com, F-O-R, adamfortexas.com, running for House District 122. And if anybody has any questions, just please feel free to reach out anytime.
Well, great. Well, we'll make sure that we put this in all of our postings and in our description, links to your campaign, and if people want to get involved, how to get a hold of your team to get engaged. Engagement is critical, especially at this point in time, because we are, I think, at a pivotal moment for where our society and where our communities are going to go. And I thank you for raising your hand to be willing to serve in that, and we wish you the best of luck. For those of you that are listening, if you could, leave us a comment. Let us know that we're providing value to you. Any questions you have, we try to respond to it. Click subscribe if you could, whether you listen to us on our audio version on Spotify or Apple, or if you're watching us on YouTube there. We'd love to just know that, again, we're providing value to our community, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.